Welcome everyone to another episode of Agency Life. I am thrilled to have on the call today is Michelle from Foresight Digital, all the way from Australia. She's ending her day and I'm starting my day. The power of technology. And Michelle has this amazing experience, like 14 years experience in digital marketing and leadership, delivery across corporate, small business and startups. And there's even a dating app story in her information that she sent us through that I'm going to dying to hear about that. She has been working in Foresight Digital with her team. They work across Australia, global brands as well. And welcome to the episode, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Tell us the story about how you started the agency, and if you can include that little startup one as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked for over 8 years in corporate marketing, and when I left there, I spent a couple of years doing marketing consulting, and I was really trying to fund some tech startups that I was working on at the time. And one of them was this dating app. This was before the time of Tinders, right?
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. In fact, while we were doing it, we found Tinder had just come out, and sort of halfway through us kind of doing our, putting together the technology and the team. And, we, of course, signed up to all of the various different dating sites to get a sense of the experience and what they do. And so I was really on Tinder back when you could swipe right and actually get to the end of the list in, 3 swipes.
It sounds like a violent Michelle.
I'm not sure that's something to be proud of at all.
So I've heard, Michelle. So I've heard.
Yeah. But it was quite fascinating because, the world of dating is really all about human connection. It's about understanding humanity, and I think one of the deepest needs that most humans have in their lives, and that is to to find a connection with another human being, whoever that is, and so it was. I personally love human psychology and how we work and why humans make the decisions that we do. And so it was great to have that opportunity. But anyway, long story short, that didn't end up working out for a number of different reasons. And so at the time I decided, well, I could go one of two ways. And I was consulting at the time, still doing marketing consulting. And at that point, we landed a large client, a government client. And I thought, gee, maybe I should kind of turn this into a business, which was weird because, I'd spent the last 2 years prior to that coming up with all of these really solid business plans for everything. And interestingly, my agency really was an evolution that formed out of the solo consulting, and it perhaps, at least in the beginning, didn't have the same level of sort of planning and structure around it that I had applied to those startup ideas. But one thing that had stuck with me from the corporate world, and was one of the reasons why I'd started consulting, was I felt that very often agencies weren't particularly proactive. I'd worked with a number of agencies in my role as a marketing leader on brand side, and I struggled to understand why these third-party organizations couldn't either deeply understand our customer or understand our needs, which was very often around things like, well, this has to make sense from an ROI perspective, and I need to business case this, and I need to prove to the business that it's going to work. Yeah. It's not all rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to bring some of that business rigor to marketing, and marketing in the digital realm. But I think sometimes digital marketing does often is great at things like, oh, great, I can track that and I can do this, I can do that. But people aren't very good perhaps at the strategic side of digital marketing and how that links back into the brand and the emotion of the brand. And so I like the idea of bringing those two things together.
Yeah.
So that's really one of the things that sparked my passion for creating a marketing business model and organization that could solve some of those challenges that I think marketers feel. And then, of course, we evolved past that over the last couple of years. Yeah.
Into things like?
So about 2 years ago, we rebranded from what we were called, which was Art Live Media, to our new brand, which is Foresight Digital.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that came from my background sitting on the board of Startup Victoria. And as I've mentioned, I'd always had a deep interest in the startup space, the scale-up space in particular. So companies that had already found what we call their product market fit. And they wanted to really scale fast. They needed to grow their teams quickly. They needed to grow their revenues quickly. They needed to hit targets that they'd perhaps put in place as part of the funding that they'd raised. And so we've now really repositioned ourselves as a business, as a plug and play growth team for innovative companies who need to scale fast or go global.
Brilliant. Yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned, which I'd love you to explain more, is about how when you're scaling these companies internationally, how they need some love. Talk to me about that. What prompted that statement?
Look, for many founders, and this is the interesting thing, right, is our audience has slightly changed, I think, over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. We used to 90% of our core contact would have been perhaps a marketer. Now I'd say the shift is more 50-50, 50% marketing leaders and then 50% founders.
Oh, really?
And that's an interesting shift, especially, and we're not talking about where they're just a small scale up. We're talking, publicly listed companies that might already be turning over 50 million, 100 million plus. So these aren't, we're very much coming in at a senior level to fulfill a true marketing team gap that a company may have as they're scaling.
Right.
And so when we talk about what these companies often need, the kind of love that they need at this point of their growth, they're experiencing challenges like, how do I scale my team? Often sometimes they've either, and this isn't just when they're raising a small amount of money, it could be it could be Series B, it could be Series C, it could be that they've just listed. But usually what happens is founders spend 6 to 12 months of their life effectively selling the company to investors, right? That's their whole deal. That's their focus. And then they get funding and then they sit there and go, oh shit.
Yeah.
Now I have to deliver.
What are we going to do now?
Now I need to turn that pretty graph into reality. And so some of the cycles that they can go through include, maybe the team that has served them so far might need to be different because they're at a different phase of growth. It may be that they've tried outsourcing, they've tried insourcing, and they've tried a number of different models and none of them work. And often that's because they usually lack something. So usually when you outsource something, you get the throughput from an executional perspective, but you don't get the leadership. And often, a scale up that maybe goes and hires a CMO, that's great, might cost them $300,000.
Yeah.
And then they've got a CMO, but can that CMO run 5 different marketing channels? Probably not.
Yeah, well, they're not going to sit down and do, they're expensive social media posters, if that's what they're...
Yeah. Exactly. And so they get the leadership, but they don't get necessarily the level of execution they want. And so this is where we can really help because we provide both of those things. And while we certainly work with CMOs and marketing teams that already have their structure built up, so we're modular. It's not like we have to be completely plug and play in terms of an entire team, but where the need is required, we will come in. That includes a consulting chief marketing officer. So it means you don't get a full-time chief marketing officer, but it's certainly a lot more cost efficient and great to kind of test out and use before you might go down the path of a full-time hire.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I think the core struggle that they have, honestly, is team-based. It really is. It's actually an HR issue more than it is a marketing issue. And then, of course, out of that comes the growth results.
Right.
So, yeah.
And you've figured out something as well with that. So you've just highlighted something really important. You know, instead of maybe getting like a 300K, can tell we're on the line to Australia, a 300K CMO, like perhaps balancing that with, okay, maybe you're getting a marketing manager and a team of people like that. So you're helping these companies structure the marketing teams for scale. Is that, am I right in saying that?
That is absolutely correct. And actually, I was just having a conversation with a venture capital firm or family office here in Melbourne today. And, you know, she was talking about how people really need that next level of marketing leader that I think, particularly for Australian companies, they're not operating at the level that, say, how do I put this? Let's talk about a scale up. A scale up has very different needs to a corporate organization.
Right.
So we have plenty of amazing marketing leaders that could come straight out of corporate into a $100 million company. And that's great if the $100 million company only wants to grow at like 6% a year. But when there's a scale up that says, no, we need to scale internationally, we're going to go into the US market and we need to scale globally, and we want to go from a $100 million company to a $1 billion company, it just requires an entirely different type of thinking. And to be honest, I think it's a talent challenge, especially that Australia experiences versus, say, the US. And it's one of the reasons why often people try and hire in from or may build out, if they're looking to scale into international locations, they may try and build out a team local into the US or into the UK. And so these are things that conversations that I'm having with venture capital firms, with family offices, that these are absolutely real challenges that these scale-ups have.
You raise an interesting point, Michelle. It's one of the main reasons I moved home, because I was running an agency. I had started in Sydney, and it was between, say, 2008 and 2012. And I was like, people were asking me to speak at events, and I was like, well, I'm not, I didn't feel like the imposter syndrome. I was like, I don't feel like an expert, but I was an expert because I embraced these technologies early. And at that time, there was social media gurus popping up left, right, and center. But what I noticed was all the tech center, everything in EMEA was being built in Dublin. So Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, HubSpot, they were all setting up their headquarters for Europe in Dublin. And now if you went, throughout the whole of Dublin, the UK, and you're right with the States, because there's been a series of, let's say somebody comes out of college, goes into Google for 5 years, they've learned more in that 5 years than a CMO in Australia in a corporate for 20 years. And they've
certainly learned something different. Corporate have amazing skills in brand, in all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, project, no, but I mean, for when they leave and they they go to a startup themselves. That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And we're just talking about in the scale and the startup business.
In the context of how to scale a business model.
Right. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's amazing, and they're just a different kind of mindset. So that is fascinating. But you've got a fantastic team there. What are some of the hiring strategies that you're using to actually build that team that you've got?
Oh, that's a good question. One of them is that we are always hiring. That's such brilliant. A thing that everyone says, but the way that we do it is we actually have a KPI around the number of people that we have in our pipeline. So we treat our talent pipeline in the exact same way as we treat our sales and lead generation pipeline.
And phenomenal.
That is the reason why that's so critically important for us. Is our business model in, separate from, say, our client's business model. Our business model is to scale marketing teams. So if we don't have a scalable hiring model, then how can our business model scale alongside our customers scaling? It can't.
Right.
So we absolutely have to have that in place. And so we have, automated systems that we use for outreach. We treat our hiring process in the same way, and with the same respect as we would treat a sales or a digital marketing campaign. So if you, some of the ads that we say might put out on Seek, we treat them like as if we were going and doing an ad. We look at what other ads people have got up, and then we're like, okay, so how do we make sure that we're different and that people click? And we track our click-through rate based on the impressions that we get. We treat it like a digital campaign. And we'll call candidates within an hour of them putting in their CV, and we'll ask them a couple of really simple questions. And one of them is, what inspired you to submit your resume? And usually if you call them within an hour, they haven't put in like another 100 resumes in the meantime and they can't recall.
Right.
And that starts to give us a sense of whether they're a good values fit, how professionally they answer the phone call, how they can speak to their experience. And then we run like an automated skills test, which is done digitally. And we give people feedback, we score them. So we have different scoring systems depending on the skill set that we're hiring for. And we have supporting each job description, we have what's called a position contract. And the position contract is effectively something that isn't signed once they come on board. Isn't signed as part of their employment contract, but it's signed once they come on board. And we go through that with them. And that includes things like, well, what's the mission of their role? If there's one thing that they should be doing, what is it? So if we're hiring a paid digital specialist, the one thing they should be doing is ensuring that our clients get leads and sales off the back of, if nothing else. Or it might be, increasing brand awareness. But either way, it's about achieving those clients' objectives and goals. Their KPIs, we live track. So each team member has live tracked KPIs across all of our clients. So if you think about our structure and how we've set up and the amount of effort that we've put into the job descriptions, the role responsibilities, all those things that, as you know, when you're trying to scale out a team of anything, whatever that thing is often what causes a team to fall over, which is lack of clarity around their responsibilities, lack of clarity around their objectives and core KPIs, lack of tracking those KPIs. All of that stuff is live and clear for each one of our team members. And that's actually something that I sell to founders. And, I talk to them about this stuff because they go, oh, wow, okay, I get it. Like, not only would we need to build a team, but we'd need to put in place all of this other structure. And you guys have built a business model to do that for marketing.
Yeah, everyone has a number. Yeah, it's the only way forward. That's what I teach as well. So it's great to hear that. That's a really interesting way of looking at. So is there somebody who is dedicated to recruitment, or is it spread? Is there a recruitment
that
person?
would probably be the next role or one of the roles we hire for? Yes. It's not at the moment. It's spread across the team leads. For those areas, but we've done that because I think it's really important for us to truly know what we're looking for. And I know this experience working in large organizations where the HR team took it and we didn't. You're much better off going through the process for at least each role yourself first and setting up, what the ideal structure looks like, and then teaching someone on the recruitment side what your needs are.
Right.
And so yes, our goal definitely after this would be to hire, if not a full-time, then a part-time acquisition specialist, and their whole role would be around filling that pipeline.
Yeah, and well, you've ambitious team growth goals there. You want to grow the team to 40 to 50 over the next few years, right?
Yeah, we do. We're at 15 people now, and I'm just saying this as what's realistic. Like, we are talking about, our core client base being companies who are scaling significantly. So how could we? It would be crazy for us to think that we wouldn't scale if we're taking on clients like that, and unless we completely, unless we say, well, we're not taking on any more than X clients, which would then be a business risk, right? Because you'd end up with a client concentration problem.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it depends on which way you're growing, but yeah, you've made the decision. But you've also made the decision that you have already been growing in the US. Talk to us about some of those companies and you want to grow further with that.
Yeah, so we have a satellite team based in Chicago in the US.
Fabulous.
Yeah, and we had previously, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we'd actually had a number of team members in the US, and then I decided to consolidate back into Australia just so that we could, I guess, grow out and mature the team rather than have so many remote workers. So that was a strategic decision at the time, but the goal was not necessarily to pull back from the US. It was simply to go, let's regroup. We're a small team. Once we get to size X, then we'll make a concerted effort to, set up a more substantial team in the US, probably in Chicago.
Right.
And especially because, in terms of talent for agencies, it is actually a really good space for performance marketing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that can make it highly competitive too.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But yeah, swings and roundabouts, I suppose. So our we already work with Salesforce in San Francisco. We've worked with Yeti in Austin, with Barcodes Inc. in Chicago. So we have US clients, and I think the US is a little different to Australia in terms of their willingness to work with teams remotely. And I don't necessarily mean remote from the US to Australia, but I mean, if you're in Chicago, you can work with someone in San Francisco, you can work with someone in New York.
Right.
They're not as needy in terms of, how localized you should be. Whereas I've found that, generally speaking, say when it comes to Australia, clients in Sydney feel the need to have someone local.
Is that still? I was wondering if that's still happening, because that was very
thing.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure that it's a thing for all scale-ups. I can say that it's definitely a thing for established brands.
Yeah, and because I do know what you mean. Even if you're working in Boston in a company, there isn't the presumption that just because someone's in New York, they'll meet. But even if you're just in Australia, they'll figure out somewhere like, oh, please come to us, or can we come to you? Very quickly on, and quite frequently. It's quite it's, oh, let's meet for a coffee, and they don't understand that coffee is going to take you, maybe 3 hours from start to finish, when you could have done 4 or 5 different calls on Zoom.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think people do sometimes underestimate the power of Zoom and just how personal video conferencing can be.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. But that's the sort of the tricky part about a relationship with these clients, perhaps not in the founder scale up stage, but with corporate brands. They're getting paid whether they have 4 cups of coffee with agencies during the day or not, right? But the agency's not getting paid for for taking the time out to drive up the road and have a cup of coffee. They're not getting paid,
That's it. And the reality is that marketers that work brand side, they don't think about it. They're not trying to be rude or not thinking about where you're coming from. That's just not on their radar.
Yeah, it's just not. That's why it's one of the reasons. And if you're a regular listener to the show, you'll hear me talk about breakfast seminars. So again, we do understand the value of meeting your clients or prospects or prospective people that you want to work with. I'm not saying about not having face-to-face time. So a great way to do that is to have a breakfast seminar to invite your prospects so that they can spend an hour and a half, with you and see you and shake your hand and look you in the eyes, so that when you suggest a Zoom call, hopefully that will be more received than they'll have spent time with you. And that way you can meet 15 prospects instead of having 15 individual coffee meetings. Which can be expensive. Speaking of expensive as well, everyone knows when you're listening to this show, it isn't all hearts, rainbows and unicorns. Well, this is about the tough conversations as well. And I always ask an agency about some of the mistakes that they've made, because as successful and as fabulous and as the great job that you're doing, Michelle, and you're one of the few Australian agencies that has got a satellite office in America. So congratulations, that's a huge achievement, because I know that can't have been easy. But one of the things that you mentioned is you had a mistake where you hired a salesperson a little bit earlier on. Tell us a little bit more about that boo-boo that you made.
Oh, and it was a boo-boo. Look, so yes, the scenario was that I hired a salesperson earlier than I should have, especially because at that point I didn't really know what our business model was, what our true differentiators were. I hadn't tested those things. And to be honest, I think the reason why I did this was because I kept telling myself, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a marketer. Mm-hmm. I mean, that had been my career. My entire career I was a marketer. I was very good at marketing. I was very good at digital. I was very good at strategy. And people talk about this in entrepreneur books all the time. It's like you start out as a doer,
yeah,
and then you have to become a leader or whatever. And I thought that I was doing the right thing by going, well, this isn't something I'm good at, so I'll try and delegate it.
Right.
But one of the things that's particularly different, I think, about agency sales is you have to be a marketer, to really understand. It's more of a strategist role, the sales role, than it is anything else.
Yeah.
Then apply on top of that sales techniques. And certainly at that point, I hadn't yet locked down or truly understood what the core roles of a salesperson in the agency environment looked like. Mm-hmm. And part of that was naivety from the perspective of I'd worked brand side my whole career. I hadn't worked in an agency. I hadn't seen what what agency sales might look like. Now, to be fair, I mean, I reached out to there's actually a UK-based agency community. I'm just trying to remember the name of it, but the guy who runs it, he runs a consulting business called Cactus.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Is it Dan, the agency man?
Yeah, Dan, the agency man. Right, but
who's recently become a boxer, I noticed.
Really?
He did his first boxing match the other day. He's a crazy.
Oh my goodness! So he's great. So before he kind of came on board, there was another owner to that business, and I think it sort of exchanged hands, and then the guy who ran Cactus kind of moved on. But I remember having this conversation with him. He was lovely enough to take a call with me and just kind of have a chat about this, whether I should hire someone, this or that. And a lot of the advice that I got from other agencies was, oh, well, all you can do with agency sales, it's all about networks. Because I was like, how do I get leads? Like,
yeah.
Leads? And that's what I was told. And in the end, at least now that we are where we are now, I've completely changed our sales structure, and I've scaled our sales structure. So effectively, we do outreach to the accounts we want. We don't necessarily respond to. I mean, we've built a great network of other development agencies and web agencies, that is, and brand agencies, creative agencies that will refer work to us. But especially with the types of clients that we're talking to, well, when a business raises a round of funding, we're reaching out. Hey, congrats on raising your 10 million.
Nice.
We saw that part of that was around growth for the US, and we'd love to help you get there. These are the brands that we've helped to scale: brand X, brand Y, brand Z. And we always start with the CEO. We from a sales perspective, it's always good to go top down. The reason for that is if you go bottom up, that it's very hard to go down again if you get refused. Yeah. Whereas if no one responds, if the CEO or the founder doesn't respond, that's cool. Well, then just go down to the next level and the next and the next. But to be honest, the response rates for us are really good. Maybe that's because, and I can say this as a marketer, marketers are just terrible to market to, they're so...
Oh, I know. They know all the tricks. I selling to agencies. Geez, they not only do they know the marketing, they know all the tricks, they know all the sales.
Exactly. So, and I also think it's a different personality type. I know while I'm a marketer, I'm also an entrepreneur, and I'm the kind of person that if someone reaches out to me and says something that I'm interested in, I will take the meeting, because I'm just that I'm open like that, and I know that other founders have that same kind of personality trait. So it sort of makes sense that persona responds to and is excited about what we have to say, or at least curious. That's all they need to be. Just need to be curious. So So look, we definitely made a big boo-boo, and it's taken me a long time to figure out, and working with coaches of our own and bringing in consultants. I mean, people, again, I think often marketers are like, oh, I don't want to bring it. We've spent tens of thousands of dollars on consultants because we're not going to sit here and be so egoic to say that we know how to do everything. We don't. Yeah. And if you can sit there and be respectful of and excited about how you can leverage other people's amazing knowledge, why go through the pain of having to do it yourself and making those mistakes when someone else can just tell you.
And that coaching consultant, I'm not going to turn this into an ad, but that coaching consultant spends a lot of time with lots of other agencies, lots of other businesses, way more than you will ever. You're in your lane, and you might get to talk to another agency owner, but the other person's getting to live and breathe lots and lots of other things and seeing them up and down. So we'll talk about that. I could go on about that, but that's another. I might need to make a podcast about that. But you've got some great points, and I really would like to take the time to actually go through the bullet points that you shared with me in the questionnaire about the experience that you learned about that. So you said about having clear job descriptions and KPIs are imperative.
Absolutely. I mean, well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier in terms of scaling a marketing team. It's not just about scaling a marketing team. It's scaling any role that you want to hire for in your business needs to have that. There's a book called The E-Myth, and that's where the concept of position contracts comes from. So the idea is you sort of say to yourself, all right, in 5 years, how is my business going to be structured? And then off the back of that, you need to make sure that each role has a position contract, and people can be in multiple positions, but you don't want to do is get into a scenario where you're kind of trying to shove multiple roles into one job description.
Got it.
Clear about it. Just say, okay, I'm hiring this, but hey, when you come in, you're basically going to be signing 3 different position contracts, because as we grow, we're going to be separating out this bit from you and that bit, because it's just so much mentally, it's much more easy from an intellectual perspective and mentally as you're growing and running a business to separate out what those roles look like if you're physically doing that in a position contract versus just mentally.
That's been a great learning that I've taken from that. I hadn't actually heard of that stance before in the position contract, so that's really good. One of the things you said as well is trusting the sales test when they show that someone's not a closer. Tell me about a sales test that you've done.
Oh, well, so we used a particular test when I was hiring for this particular role, for this
Yeah.
sales role. And it was for sales, and it's sort of determined whether they were likely to be a closer or they were sort of more of a farmer and an account manager. And I liked what this person said more than what had come back on the test. And I've made this mistake more than once, and it's not just with a sales role where, you know, I like what the person says, and then ultimately their personality type is just not suited for the role.
Right.
And because, you know, I'm sort of partial to people that are really sort of strategic thinkers and, you know, say smart things.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not necessarily what a role always needs. So I didn't listen to the sales test, and I remember this test came back and it didn't say it was terrible, but basically said this person's not a closer.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's definitely something I would say. Yeah, they have to close the door, close the sale, close the door, tidy that up. Yeah.
At the very least, you need to separate out what those sales responsibilities are going to be. So obviously now, for instance, when it comes to prospecting, what we term prospecting, and we do this for our clients as well. It's part of our growth packages. We have a team that is dedicated to outreach. So their whole day is, you know, looking at lists, segmenting, looking at potential buy triggers. So, you know, when certain things happen in the news and when the right time is to reach out and what to say, all of that stuff. That's literally all they do. They don't close the sale. They don't do anything. They just reach out, follow up.
Yeah, BDR. Yeah, just warming that bit up. That's fantastic.
Then you've got the next step, which is I guess the sort of key sales role that kind of needs to take it from that first meeting through to signing the signature. And in some ways, I sort of think of that role almost like a sales project manager, because they've got to keep the momentum going. One of the key things about sales is this concept of momentum. It's hard to describe, but it's like if you reach out to someone, you know, and then they respond and say, yeah, I'm interested. Then every day you leave that, or every day, say after your first meeting, you haven't followed up, you are letting the momentum dissipate in terms of their decision making. So your goal is not to rush them, but to move at the pace that they are matched to you, if that makes sense.
Keep close and keep top of mind. Keep in the wings, not down the road.
Your goal at every communication point is to determine what the next communication point might look like.
What's the next step?
All the way through that sale. And then you've got pre-sales, which say in a enterprise tech, business model, those are quite clear. It's like there's these enterprise pre-sales technical people. In our space, I'd call them pre-sales as well. They're sort of pre-sales support. At the moment, we use our team lead, so they are the channel specialists, because, you know, I'm coming in going, all right, guys, we've got this sale. This is what it looks like, and then they will come back with sort of their channel level plans based on what we're talking about. So they don't have to close the sale. But that is separate. Again, it's not just me, and in fact it's important that it's not just me in the sale, because otherwise by the time the sale closes, then there's a huge amount of knowledge in one person's head that has to be handed over, which isn't ideal.
Correct.
So I think that's the other piece of it, is just to be clear. I realize that this is not always a luxury you have when you first start a business, and that we now are starting to have that luxury ourselves in terms of being able to separate these roles out. Yeah. But at least know intellectually that they are separate roles, and at least plan for that to be the case.
Yes.
Really the first piece.
Plan for it. In the beginning, you're going to be doing it all, but know that you're planning it out, or even segmenting your day, going, okay, in the morning, I'm doing prospecting. In the afternoon, I'm doing closing, or, following up, like segment if you're doing it anyway. One of the things that I love to ask people, so speaking of in your head, a personal habit or a routine that you feel has contributed to your success. And I'm delighted to hear that it is something that comes up over and over again. I know you said about doing some meditation.
Yes, so I do 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation. I do it with Andy from Headspace.
Yes,
who
I love his accent.
I know, his accent is so great, and he's just
and the little animations are the best.
very, very cute, very cute.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
And I sort of enjoy focusing on something a little different each time. I particularly loved the one on acceptance.
Yeah.
Where a lot of that pack actually goes through not so much, oh, hey, just accept stuff. It's actually recognizing when you're resisting something. I'm like, oh, gee, that's a much better way of looking at it. Yeah, I can definitely see it. You know, there's so many points throughout the day where you steel yourself against something that's about to happen, or you the stress that's caused is actually by the fact that you are subconsciously resisting
it and trying to control it. Yeah,
trying to control it, which is the life of any business owner. That is,
I know.
that is the constant struggle that you're up against. So yeah, I and look, I'd love to say that I do it absolutely religiously. I don't. It's something that drops, and then 2 weeks later I'm thinking, oh my God, why am I so stressed? And I'm thinking,
it's so funny, isn't it? I know that happens. Like, oh yeah, I've been meditating. But you don't do all of this on your own. We talk about how you balance your agency life with your personal relationships. Tell us who's there in the wings with you.
Oh yes. Well, I have an amazing partner, my husband. We've been together for 8 years now, and we really do work as a team. We understand where each other's coming from. We've actually spent a lot of, I remember we went to Bali maybe, I don't know, probably a couple of years before we got married, and we had this like breakthrough moment where we both did a DISC personality profile test.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me how he used to say, oh, I want to be spontaneous. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it was weird because it was sort of at odds with certain other things that he said. And then when he did this personality test, turns out he's a perfectionist. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. He's not actually trying to be spontaneous. What's happening is he needs so much information in order to create the perfect plan that someone like me, I'm very happy to work in a very non-specific kind of, like, I can plan stuff in the future without feeling committed to it definitely happening. Whereas for him, it's not so much that he's disorganized or trying to plan on the last minute. It's literally that he's trying to make sure that he's got all of the pieces perfect in order to create this perfect plan.
The spontaneous moment. Oh, that's cute.
Just those moments of getting to know each other better, and and the big three, like, little things like, are you hungry, are you tired, and are you cold? Those both of us have those things. It's like, as soon as if there's one that's out, it's like, okay, Michelle, you need a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
I can see, take that hanger away. So yeah, I think we very much work as partners, and I can't. I see other people and the dramas, and I've had, I had relationships before my husband where it was just, so much energy getting sucked out of you through your relationships. And I think to myself, like, there is so much energy that is taken through running through the pressure of running and growing a business.
Yeah.
The last thing you need is for your personal relationships to drain your energy. They should add to your energy. They should be what lifts you up. They have to, because you're so right. It does take everything. Especially some days, it can take absolutely everything. So the last thing you need is somebody
who's caused drama in their own life ringing you, giving that drama to you. It's like they're just not taking responsibility. It's a tough love, but that's the way it goes. As we come to a conclusion, Michelle, I'd love, thank you so much for all the information you've shared here. It's been fantastic, and I especially love talking to female business owners, especially agency owners as well. Out there today, there is an agency who's just starting. Maybe there's another Michelle, or there's another agency couple, or there's a guy that's going, you know what, I'm going to open an agency. What is the one tip that you would give them when they're starting out?
Oh, that is an excellent question. There's so much to know. I would say speak to other agency owners that are ahead of where you are, that are where you want to be. I think I probably didn't do that early enough.
Right.
Part of that was just because I had built my community in the startup and tech community.
Got it.
And I forgot to build my community in the agency world.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is our business model. And of course, over time, those relationships formed. And that's not to say that, again, I didn't reach out to some of these consultant types, but I think, I remember one of my friends who runs another agency. She's also another female founder, and she's so cool. And she came around to us one day and she said, look, can you just take me through your operational systems and how you work? And I did. And I thought, gee, I'm happy to give her that information. Surely, there's no reason why other agencies wouldn't do the same.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're new and starting out, there are so many hurdles that you can probably avoid, especially if you haven't worked in an agency before, by talking to the people that have done it before. And if you can't find anyone local, the great news is LinkedIn is awesome. And you reach out to people. Like if I were to reach out to an agency owner in the UK or in the US, where perhaps they don't feel like it's, say a direct competition, then, they'll take my call.
I know. I think that's something that people, like I certainly didn't realize until I was right in the middle of it, is there's the competition element is very, very small, where people will go, oh, that's my competitor. It's actually extremely supportive, open, sharing community that people are genuinely want to help each other, because there's very, very rarely, there's actually no two agencies are the same. They're all completely different.
That's it. And there's so many adjacent sort of agency types as well. So, I mean, we are we specialize in a particular space. And then in terms of the agencies, that means I can talk to creative agencies, I can talk to these types of agencies, those types of agencies, and get lots of ideas. You don't just have to limit yourself to the very specific niche of agencies that you might be in direct competition with.
That's right.
Because a lot of the models work very similarly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to share all of your knowledge. I wish you the absolute best of luck with everything. It's been incredible.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Agency Life. We'll see you again soon.